visioning process. You know, this process began about a year and 2 months ago. And I believe just by the number of people that were downtown today and the people that are here this evening shows the interest that is what's happening with Fisher's Peak. You know, Fisher's Peak is important to, you know, everybody that's here. You're from our community. And we all identify Fisher's Peak, you know, it's as home. It's the first thing that you see when you're coming in from the south. It's the first thing that you see when you're coming in from the north. You know, it's home. Now, you know, you can see, when you're coming in from the north, you can see Fisher's Peak right when you leave Pueblo. So it's interesting to see that it's just so important to be able to see Fisher's Peak when we're coming into Trinidad. And like I said, you know, this is something this is a project that comes once in a lifetime. And I think we need to take advantage of it. It's to take advantage of it for you, the citizens of Trinidad and Los Angeles County and southern Colorado. That's how important I feel that this project is. And we need your input, and that's the reason for these engagements, is so that you can give us your thoughts of what you would like to see this project to be. And we have a couple of partners, some partners in this project, which is the Trust for Public Land and Nature Conservancy. We have many others that are also interested in partnering with this project as well. And I'm not going to stay too long, but I just want to say at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mimi Mathers, and she's from Root House, and they are going to be conducting the visioning process this evening. So Mimi, would you please give a warm welcome to Mimi Mathers.
Thank you all for coming. I talked to many of you earlier in the day. I was at Los Angeles Grill from 8 to 4:30, and I did not stop talking about Fisher's Peak Ranch that whole time. It was amazing. I thought maybe like 10 people would trickle in. I probably talked to 60 plus people. So it's great to hear that there's excitement about the property. So again, my name is Mimi Mather. I am working for the three partners, the City of Trinidad, the Trust for Public Land, and the Nature Conservancy. And my job is to essentially talk to you and hear the community input. We're launching today with this meeting and with my meetings earlier this morning, the Fisher Peak Ranch Visioning Project. So we want to hear from you, we want to hear your vision. Before we hear from you, we've got a little talking to do. Not me, because I talked all day. However, can we get the next slide? The plan for the evening is for Matt Moorhead from the Nature Conservancy and Wade Shelton from Trust for Public Land to give you a brief project update. They'll tell you more about the deal that's in the works and the property itself. And then I'll come back online, tell you a little bit more about the visioning project, and then we really want to hear from you. So let the ideas start to percolate. You know, what are your ideas, your hopes, your dreams, your concerns for this piece of property, because that's what we want to hear. And I'll be calling on you, but you can also shoot me an email, fill out a comment card. There's lots of different ways to provide input. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Wade Shelton from the Trust for Public Land.
Thank you, Mimi. On that note, I'm tempted to stop talking. Can I get the next slide, please? So first, my name is Wade Shelton. I'm a senior project manager with the Trust for Public Land. Briefly, before we get into the project, update and overview, one point that Mimi made to me earlier is that the Trust for Public Land's reputation, or lack thereof, precedes us. Most people don't know who we are. So I'm going to give you just very brief background about the Nature Conservancy and the Trust for Public Land. Obviously, Nature Conservancy, international conservation group, focused on preserving nature, protecting the last great places. Trust for Public Land, we're the flip side of that coin. We preserve land for people, so that people have places to get outside and enjoy everything. That's better now, people can hear me. And somewhat ironically, we are sister organizations. The Trust for Public Land grew out of the Nature Conservancy in the early 70s. And it's why we're partnering on this project. It's too big an opportunity for either of our organizations to handle on our own, but also it is a great marriage between nature preservation and public access. And it takes both our organizations, all of you guys, and then a lot of partners to really realize your vision for this property. And of course, we can answer more questions about our organizations as the night goes on, but that's not why you're here. Can I get the next slide, please? So the Fishers Peak Partnership really started about a year ago, and it's over the past year it's grown quite a bit. It started out with the City of Trinidad, who then brought in the Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy to see if we might be able to help preserve Fishers Peak and get it open to the public. And over the past year, collectively, we've been able to bring in 2 other big partners for this project. The Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund, or GOCO, who's with our first funding partner, and then the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who's our second funding partner. Get the next slide, please. And then just to give you an overview on the Fishers Peak Ranch, you may all know it as the Crazy French Ranch. We are renaming it as Fishers Peak. It is the full 19,200 acre property. So if you look at this map, it's basically everything outlined in orange down to the New Mexico border in Raton Pass. That's what we're looking to buy. This includes Fishers Peak. It's just south of Trinidad and east of I-25. This property has 3 of its own exits off of I-25, and then 60 miles of interior ranch roads, 4-wheel drive trails, and things like that. So there's a lot of potential for access on the property. And when you combine the Fishers Peak Ranch with the surrounding protected land, the acquisition results in over 40,000 acres of conserved land with 35,000 acres that would be accessible to the public. So obviously, pretty big opportunity to create a great outdoor recreation mecca in Trinidad. Next slide, please. The conservation values of this property are kind of difficult to overstate. It's very easy to understate them because of its size. I mean, you've got wildlife, biodiversity, and public recreation opportunities here. You've got a big property that's it's very little development and largely intact ecosystem. That's pretty rare these days. A diverse range of habitats, from higher elevations, to lower elevations that wildlife needs, including a lot of those migration corridors. Property of this size, with all the adjacent public land, you've got an opportunity to protect a whole watershed for all Trinidad and Los Animas County. You've also got the Fishers Peak Viewshed. Somewhat ironically, one of the first times I went to Santa Fe, my wife and I are driving down here, and she said, wait till you see the property to your left, just south of Trinidad. It's amazing. And I said, I know, honey, that's the opportunity that we're getting to chase out there. So clearly, great for travelers along I-25 seeing this ranch rather than a housing development or anything like that. And then finally, convenient access and great public recreation potential. It's rare you find the highest peak east of I-25 in the U.S. that has direct exits that can get you to it right off I-25. It's a pretty big opportunity for all of us. Next slide, please. So, as some background, one question we're asked quite a bit is who initiated the project to buy Fishers Peak Ranch? A lot of people think it was the Trust for Public Land, others think it was the Nature Conservancy, but it's not. It was the City of Trinidad. If Greg Sund and Mayor Rico didn't call Matt and I a little over a year ago and say, hey, you guys were interested in Fishers Peak a few years ago, but it didn't go anywhere, would you like to help us buy it? None of us are here. GOCO, CPW wouldn't have made the grants that they did this year to support this effort. So we're here because of your leadership, the leadership of Trinidad City Council, Mayor Rico, Greg Sund, City Manager. Without all of them, we're all doing something else tonight. Can I get the next slide, please? So we've got a 4-year history of when this property first was advertised for sale, and we first took a look at it. But the challenge we had then was we knew we couldn't do it without public partners, that neither TPL or the Nature Conservancy could do this on our own without the involvement of Trinidad. So after a year-long effort, after those guys first invited us to come down and take a look at it, we finally have developed a framework for the project and have a purchase agreement that allows us to buy the property and hold it. But none of this is possible without City Council's patience in letting us see if we could put a deal together, and also all of your passion of the local community that made it clear that we would be implementing your vision in preserving and opening this property to the public. Without that enthusiasm, none of this would have worked. And the next slide, please. So our project goal is to make the Fisher's Peak Ranch a beautiful, well-managed public asset that benefits the local community and helps Trinidad grow in a sustainable manner. And what that really means is this would be a nature preservation project. It's a public access project for public recreation. But at its core, what it's going to be is an economic catalyst. It gives tourists, travelers, a reason to come to Trinidad, stay, vacation, maybe move here, and that right now, unfortunately, Trinidad doesn't have. And that's really our goal, is to figure out how we can implement that for you all and make that a reality. And the next slide, please. So I'm going to pass the mic now to Matt, who's going to talk about the acquisition overview and where we go from here.
One second, please. I can bellow if I need to. Hi there, my name is Matt Moorhead, not just the guy sort of standing there awkwardly watching Wade do the presentation. With the Nature Conservancy, I've been working in Southeast Colorado for getting close to 20 years at this point. And I'll tell you, it's challenging for me to stand quietly for that long when there's the opportunity to talk about this project. So 20 years of working in conservation in Southeast Colorado, this is pretty unparalleled, the sort of energy that has gone into creating this opportunity, and at this point bringing it to the place where we're ready to start talking about it publicly, getting public feedback, input, to see that it really does turn into what it should be in the future. So I'm going to give a little bit of background, just let's get the data out there, so I know there's a lot of talk and conversations, so we're getting some accurate information. Our two organizations are under contract to purchase the ranch. As it says up there, it's not an inexpensive place. $25.45 million is the appraised value of this property. That's certainly in line with what we expected from market conditions for a property with these kinds of resources in this location in Colorado. It's on a fast time frame. If all continues to go well, we should close on the acquisition of this property by the end of February. So just about 2.5 months out. Part of the process to make sure it continues to move forward, of course, is normal legal stuff around real estate due diligence. So we're just making sure everybody owns what they say they own, that there's not some nuclear waste site that nobody talked to us about, et cetera, along the way. We're not terrifically concerned about the due diligence of this process, but it takes the time, we're moving through it. But here, the next one is part of the big one. So part of the value that the Nature Conservancy and Trust for Public Land brings to a project like this is our ability to essentially kind of step into the breach, take the opportunity to secure the property, while it continues to take us and our partners time to finish the complete funding package. So we have, at this point, raised, as Wade pointed out, from Great Outdoors Colorado and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we have about $14.5 million that have been pledged and obligated to this project. So part of what we're doing as well is just getting the pieces in place such that our organizations have the comfort and confidence that this is a project over the next several years that we can complete the funding for, complete the planning for, and actually see it achieve its ultimate goal. And that's the sort of thing that between now and the end of February, that's what Wade and I do. That's what our job is, so we're working through that process. Again, with the kind of energy we see behind this project, I'm as optimistic as I have been in 20 years for a project of this scale that we'll get to the finish line. Next slide, please. So you're in the midst of step one, which is prior to closing. Let's make sure that we're answering questions, we're getting information out to the public, and most importantly, we're giving the public the opportunity to start shaping the vision for how is this going to play its role in the future, the lifestyle future of the city of Trinidad, Los Alamos County, and Southeast Colorado. So starting in the spring of 2019, we're going to move into, I am more than happy to bellow if I need to, but phase two Property stewardship and management plan. One of the things that, of course, draws, I think, everybody to a place like this is its beauty. It's a beautiful part of Colorado that beckons to get out. It's a playground. People here want to enjoy it, and they want to do so, I think, in a way as well that says it's going to be there for our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids. So one of the first things that'll be happening after a property acquisition is a good process of let's learn the property, let's learn what's out there. So we'll be engaging members of the science community, our partners, our own staff, colleagues. We will be looking for public opportunities as well to go out and learn what's out there. So that starts informing the process for developing a long-range plan. Let's make sure that we know what's out there so it can be well taken care of in the future while achieving its goals. Ultimately, part of that process, of course, as I just mentioned, is going to result in a comprehensive plan. So how is this place going to be managed as a public amenity in the future? And of course, that's where our partners at Colorado Parks and Wildlife come in as well with that expertise and that mission of providing and managing for lands that provide for that public access and recreation. So we'll be working closely with them, closely with the City of Trinidad, and while we all finish the funding package and we finish the comprehensive plan, we'll be ultimately in that 2021-2023 timeframe, getting ready to actually transfer it ultimately into public ownership, where it becomes, at that point, open for public recreation, achieving conservation, achieving the community and economic goals. Next slide, if we have one. Yep. I think I can accelerate through and get to questions, because I think I just talked about all of them. So, next. Well, talked about most of this too. This just is a quick rundown of everything I was talking about with fundraising. $7.5 million from our lottery dollars here in Colorado. $7 million from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. The other fundraising, it's underway. I think it will be a healthy mix of some additional public funding, state, federal public funding sources, private funding, both private individuals, anywhere from local to folks at a national level, and private foundations. Why do I think we can raise funds at a national level for this? Because this is a wonderful story. There are so many people around the country who simply want to support communities that are engaging with this kind of a project and this kind of a resource. So the very fact that Trinidad itself is spurring this, looking towards conservation, natural resources, and engaging people with the great outdoors as a cultural and economic solution, that motivates people across the country. So our expectation is that this is a project that will resonate near and far, and will be a part of the long-range funding plan for this property. I think a key point here that as we get down to the bottom is we've had some questions. What kind of burden might this be financially for Trinidad in the future? And the goal here is that it won't be. This is a project by the time of public transfer. The financing should be completed, so there shouldn't be a major obligation for funding the actual acquisition. And ultimately, I think there's been good concepts that Trinidad itself doesn't have the resources or expertise for management of this property to its full extent, which is why our partners at Colorado Parks and Wildlife are happily here at the table. This is a marriage of making sure the right partners with the right skill sets and the right goals are all at the table. So ultimately, this should not be a long-range burden for Trinidad. And I think I've covered those points as well. Next slide. I think this is going to go back to Mimi at this point. So, of course, if at any point along the way, if there was questions about where we are right now with regard to the project, the acquisition, real estate, what have you, our organizations, Wade and I are happy to answer them. Yes?
When you speak of public ownership, would that be the Colorado Parks and Wildlife that would own this property?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways it could unfold. Right now, it could be that the City of Trinidad owns the title to the property itself, but in that instance, it would also be part of a long-range partnership agreement with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. For instance, a lot of folks don't know Trinidad Lake State Park is not actually owned by the state of Colorado, it's actually owned by the federal government. with a long-term arrangement for being managed by Colorado Parks and Wildlife as a state park. Same thing with, the map isn't up there, but on some of the maps you've seen, the Lake Dorothy State Wildlife Area is actually also not owned by the state of Colorado. It's owned by the city of Raton as part of the municipal watershed, but it's managed as a public unit by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So it is possible, if through this process it makes sense to be owned by Colorado Parks and Wildlife or even another entity we're not aware of. It's on the table. We're not necessarily expecting that.
I'll just add to that the most important thing for everyone to take away from tonight is that we're here to implement your vision. The Trust for Public Land and the Nature Conservancy, we are not beholden to any one public ownership structure. All that we care about is that we balance nature preservation and public access, so there's a good marriage between the two. One of the problems you get with a lot of public land is that it's usually one or the other. So you end up having public land that's loved to death or not really available for the public's use at all. So we're really looking to all of you and the city leaders in Trinidad to help us determine what's going to be the best outcome for that. That includes listening to the business community as well, because we want this to be an economic catalyst for Trinidad and Los Angeles County. So it's not up to us, it's up to all of you.
I think I saw another question over here.
Yes, I'm curious. I know you can't give a long, complete answer.
You'd be
but
amazed at how long the answer might
Give us time.
be. Actually, yeah, either one of us.
I'm really curious just what is there now in terms of structures. You mentioned a lot of road, but I'm just curious. I know people owned it, and there must be homes or home or this, that, or the other. I'm just curious a little bit generally what's there now and what the idea might be to do with those structures that are there already.
Well, there's, I think there's 5 houses on the property, and we're in the process actually of determining that right now. Exactly what's the condition? Are there ones that just from an expense and hassle perspective makes sense to not have there? What do we keep? What do we make it look like? We haven't fully determined that yet. It's partly a use question, it's partly a financial question. So that'll also be part of that after it actually gets acquired. We'll determine that. Now, ultimately, a lot of that infrastructure as well, it may not, some of that may make sense for future access and use. Ultimately, maybe there's a visitor center, maybe there's some kind of educational facility. Whether or not the structures that are there now make sense for that, I don't know. That's the kind of thing we'll look to in the process.
And just one other thing, what do you have to do to get water up there?
That, I can take that one.
Ish.
Water.
Well,
You want me to take it?
I think Wade really wants to answer that.
Matt and I are both talkers, so that's going to be one of the challenges of this project, is that if I'm talking, Matt's going to want to talk. And if Matt's talking, I'm going to want to talk. So thank you for your patience with both of us. Because we'd be here all night if each of us talked as much as we want. Water is a challenge for the property. I mean, this is not a property that has the huge river or creek running through it. It does have stock and domestic wells that we are planning to reuse. But that's, it certainly gives you a glimpse. The deeper dive we're going to have to do with infrastructure to figure out what do we need to do on the ground to accomplish everything that we're going to be listening to you guys over the next couple months and really the next couple years to figure out how to implement this on the ground. Water is a limited resource up there. So that's part of what we'll need to look at is where can we reuse those wells? Is it possible, do we need to have existing additional ones? That sort of thing. Same thing with the roads. You've got 60 miles of interior ranch roads, 4-wheel drive roads, and trails, a lot of which could be repurposed for public use, whether it's for vehicles, mountain bikes, hiking, things like that. But we're going to need to take a hard look once we've bought the property to figure out what's safe, what's not. Same thing with the buildings. So this is it's going to be a pretty deep dive to figure this stuff out. And initially knowing what kind of amenities you guys want beyond the obvious recreational uses, hunting, mountain biking, hiking, climbing, things like that, that's going to help us figure out what we should do with it.
And a huge part of that, I think your question goes to this as well, there's an economic reality. A property that's 30 square miles, likely most of that 30 square miles is going to be pretty wild in nature, because there's a sheer practicality of how much it would cost to put the usable infrastructure in as well. So that's going to be a part of the planning and due diligence process that we're all working on collectively, and that we'll keep the community at the table as a part of as well.
Are you aware of where First and Second Springs are?
I'm not, wait.
No.
So not yet, but I hope we will be.
We used to hike at Valendale area. You go up kind of a road where the city trucks used to go, then you veer off from it. There's this hill there, not too far from there, headed toward the peak. It's got some rocks there, and there's a spring right there where you could get really good water. You don't want to mess that up. No. And then you continue on up to what we used to call Goat Hill. It's a lot of aspen trees falling down, stepping over them, getting up there, going around to the other side. And once you get over to the south side, down past Cow Dog Lake, we call it, you go toward the west till you can't go anymore, and there's Second Springs over there, and they were both really good water in there. Not very much water trickling, but enough to camp with.
This is a perfect illustration of part of what we're going to be doing here over this coming year. Winter, spring, summer, fall, the property is different, has different benefits, different resources during those different periods, and we're going to be working very hard to collect that kind of information. Because that's the kind of information that needs to be on the table for a credible planning process. Like you just said, what are the things that, what's too important to impact too negatively along the way? Can we make sure that information is there?
Yeah, and those two, the First Springs and Second Springs would be ideal to keep a trail going through there, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question over here.
Yes, have y'all thought about who to contact regarding trail building, that type of thing throughout the land? Like, for example, CFI, would they be a good contact in maybe allocating people to do trail building?
I think that's exactly one of the things as well that needs to be on the table. Do we know who right now? No. But I think that's going to be part of the process. In addition to finding out what the resources are, planning for where the trails are, we need to then be able to answer the question, who, where, and how much as well, so we can make sure the right resources, the right intent, and the right expertise is at the table.
If you need a contact, I've worked with the Colorado Mountain Club for years.
That'd be great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And then has anyone contacted about possible climbing in the area? It appears to be pretty good rock for rock climbing.
Nobody's contacted us yet, so you might be the first there as well. But I think when you look up at those basalt cliffs, I think that's something that everybody's going to be thinking is what's that resource like.
Do you folks have contacts with Native peoples that might have information or places that they consider sacred that should be factored into this process?
We haven't yet this early in the process, but I think having an open door to that kind of input during the public planning process certainly would be interesting to hear.
Do you guys know if the old Raton Pass Road or the old Santa Fe Trail is on the Crazy French Ranch?
Don't know for positively whether or not any of the actual physical part of the trail touches it, but it certainly looks down on all of it from there, and it would be pretty close since a lot of that trail followed the roadbed of the highways and the railroad.
Because I think another logical partner to bring in would be like the National Historic Trails Society.
Well, exactly. In the Santa Fe Trail System, as it already has congressional designation, there's some interesting opportunities to look at them for some resources and funding.
Good idea. Other questions? To your left.
I'm Jared Chatterley, City of Raton, Department of Parks and Rec. I know that Raton doesn't have, we're New Mexico, and I understand that. But has there been any attempt to reach out to like Mexico State Parks or to the City of Raton? Because speaking as a park rec director, we would be very supportive of everything that you are trying to do. We understand that our economies are very much connected, and this is tremendous, and that there will be access coming through Raton and through state parks to that. So we would like to be as much as we can be in the conversation, knowing that we're in New Mexico and not in Colorado, to help you achieve your goals. So,
No, it's, to answer your question, you just beat us to it. No, that's been part of our plan from the very beginning, was looking at Sugar Reed Canyon State Park and seeing that, while we have, a boundary between two states, the land doesn't care. And that there is a huge opportunity here to have consistent management amongst our two states so that Sugar Reed Canyon State Park is as big a complement to Fisher's Peak and the two state wildlife areas and vice versa. Let's make sure to exchange cards. I actually met some of the folks from the state park about 20 minutes ago as well. We did the same thing. And when we've had conversations with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, that's clearly something they want to do as well, is how can we have complementary management and look at this as a resource that both New Mexico and Colorado can benefit from.
One last thing, has there been thought about a need for a search and rescue organization or some like local services, through Los Angeles County or the local sheriff's department or something like that?
Rudimentary?
No,
At this point, not in any detail, but
no, that's something we'll definitely want to flesh out with you all, because one of the important pieces again is keeping costs low for all our partners, especially once this is conveyed into public ownership, knowing that there could be volunteers who will handle search and rescue and things like that. I think throughout Colorado that's common, where there's a lot of public land, and that would make a lot of sense here too.
that just causes a thing to spring to mind for me, which is one of the really exciting things about this project is that this is really ground floor. And even though it's ground floor, that doesn't mean that it has to be essentially invented in isolation. Trinidad has a wonderful opportunity to look across the Rocky Mountain West and actually even further, to look for communities that have faced these challenges over the last 25 years and figured out solutions. So I think there's a great opportunity to learn whether it's infrastructure, development, building, financing, search and rescue, water management, partnering with cross-jurisdictional partners. There's great opportunities to learn and try and take the best practices of what's worked well around the country and apply it here.
How many access points do you have right now, and could you tell me what they are to the property?
As Wade pointed out, there's 3 exits off of Interstate 25. Those are all gated and locked exits at this point. It's private property at this point, but that's the dominant sources of access at this point. In terms of what the access points will be in the future,
Do you have anything from the east?
From the east,
From the east
technically, if you were to drive down into New Mexico and go through our friends over at Sugar Reed State Park into the state wildlife areas, and then drop down the cliffs.
County road access from the east?
Not at this point. I didn't.
You don't know of any, or there's not?
There is not eastern county road access to the property at this point.
85-2 isn't an access point?
Not that we're aware of, but
85-5.
Does it get all the way there?
It comes all the way over and ties into
It's on your map.
Lake Dorothy.
Yeah, from the east. Just a thought, we used to hike from the New Mexico side up to that Second Springs I was telling you about. We would go through there up on the Mesa, Raton Mesa, come down. So maybe another trail from that area, I don't know.
It is hikeable, but I know from exploring up there, there is no vehicle traversable road.
No, we're talking hiking.
I'm gonna pull the talkers off the stage. Because you guys are starting to share ideas, and it's time for that. Thank you guys. And Matt and Wade are around, so please come up and ask some questions. I just want to give you all the chance to do some talking now. Next slide, please. So we're getting to the visioning, the more interactive component. We really have 3 goals for the visioning project, and it's 1, to involve all of you in the development of a vision of shaping the future visitor experience of Fisher's Peak Ranch. It's also to build awareness and hopefully some excitement for this property. And then 3, just to keep the community informed. So to that third point, I encourage you to sign up if you haven't already. So we've got your email. We'll be sending out periodic project updates. You can also follow Fisher Peaks Ranch on Facebook and Instagram. We'll be posting pretty pictures as we get them, as well as project updates. Next slide, please. In terms of audiences, we really have the ear to the ground. Our primary audience is the community of Trinidad, residents, leaders, local business owners. We want to hear from all of you. Beyond that, we do want to hear from folks in the region, from folks across the state, from folks south of the border in New Mexico. So I'm encouraging, if you are a part of a group that you think would be interested in this project, please reach out to me at the Fisher Peaks Ranch at Gmail email address and hook me up, because I'll be calling folks and just spreading the word as much as I can. And I also want to talk to some kids. I want to get the youth informed about this project and the potential, because they're the ones who are going to be enjoying it for longer than any of us. So if you have ideas for how I can connect with the youth in Trinidad, I'm all ears on that one. Next slide. And then what I've been telling folks today is that at this point, really only 2 decisions have been made. One is that the ranch is going to be protected, it's going to be conserved, and 2, that it's going to be open to the public. And that's really it. So it's really a blank canvas, and that's where you all come in. We want your input for what else? What do you want to do and see out there? How do you envision the Fisher Peak project to be? Next slide. So I've typed up a set of questions, and these are really just intended as food for thought for you all. Let me rattle them off. I'm sure you have your own ideas, and I want to hear them too, but maybe these will just get the juices flowing a little bit. So what do you value most about the property, and what do you want to protect? How would you like Fisher's Peak Ranch to serve the city of Trinidad? What type of future uses and recreation, if any, would you like to see developed on the property? 20 years from now, what do you hope to encounter on Fisher's Peak Ranch? And lastly, would you like to see uses and infrastructure that draw more visitors to the Trinidad area, and if so, what kind? So with that, Wade's going to help me out and take some notes, and I'd love for you just to raise your hand and share an idea. If you have another question, we'll address those too, but we'd just love to hear what you have to say. Yeah, in the back.
As a kid, I used to ride a horse up there a lot. I grew up on that mountain. I walked a lot of the locals there did. Even we used to get trail rides along the Rim Rock, coming up from Ingleville, everywhere. And I would love to see that back on there. Trail rides, stables, city-owned stables or state-run stables. Yeah, I think it'd be amazing to have something like that. Because I'm sure Troy has probably ridden that thing so many times on horseback, he probably loves it. Well, maybe not.
Great. So question is, yeah?
I think it's beautiful to look at, and I hope that some of this doesn't destroy that part of it.
Good point.
I would like to ban all off-road vehicles.
Okay. Non-motorized use?
What's that?
Only non-motorized use?
Right.
Yeah.
I would just like to counter that one to where I could see limited Jeep trails to where we have hiking, biking, some limited, places where you could take a Jeep or, other type of vehicle.
Yep, okay.
And mixed use in the right places where it belongs would be how I'd prefer to clarify that.
Okay. Yeah, one.
I think as far as value, it's proximity and accessibility. The 2 things that really jump out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ma'am.
I'd like to just address one thing here. I'm really touched that it will be part of our legacy and who all we are and growing up, and that not a company will buy Fisher's Peak decorative fences, that we have control of that. I would also like to see, and really excited about the small businesses that could spur from this, the outdoor recreational equipment, the climbing, the biking, all those businesses. as someone in the hospitality industry, I think it's really beautiful when people cross that Raton border on either side of it, and they are in our area, that they don't feel like they have to go up north and in other places in Colorado to have the outside experience, that they will cross the border and they will be in Colorado or be in Raton, and they will be in that outside experience immediately. They won't have to travel further.
I like that you said legacy, and as a quick aside, I was in Los Animas Grill, and this guy was taking a picture of me talking to some other people, and I was kind of like, what are you doing? And he came over and sat down, and he was from the library, and he's like, this is a hugely important project, and this is about the town's legacy, and I'm starting a file on Fisher Peaks Ranch, so I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah?
One of the things, how would you like Fisher Peak Ranch to serve the city of Trinidad? I think you've got to really include, as Cy just said, Raton also, because part of the access and usage of this ranch is going to come through Sugaree, Lake Dorothy, lots of different places. So the two-way traffic between Trinidad and Raton, as far as hiking and biking, is going to be unbelievable, because the thought process, we have over 4 million people who live within 3 hours of here. So once this thing is opened up, it's going to be extremely, extremely popular. So it's going to be very, very important that we have both sides of the hill on the same page, so all the policies are the same, everything is going to be exactly the same, so we can preserve it, because it's going to get used.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Get somebody over here. Yeah.
I was thinking a little bit more, like maybe a ski resort, maybe on one part of it. I know that they're talking not having the motorized vehicles and stuff, but at a certain level, and then maybe something like that on the other side, or just something for the people to come in and be able to spend that money, you know, tourists to be here.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to, I'm one of those New Mexico folks, so forgive me. I work for New Mexico State Parks. And because I work and I'm based at Sugaree Canyon State Park, I'm always thinking about the wildlife. They were kind of there first. So I'm throwing my 2 cents in.
Thank you. Yes.
Another point to that ATV off-road vehicle things. I know there are a lot of elk up there because people used to hunt on that ranch, and that is a valuable resource for tourism, and they won't be there if you let people drive off-road on ATVs and so forth.
Okay. Being sensitive to that. Yes.
I think it was Howard mentioned that there's 4 million people, and earlier someone said we don't want to love it to death either, so I think you really have to balance that it doesn't get overrun by that.
Yep, balance and avoiding loving to death. Yep.
Well, I was late coming, but I just want to throw my 10 cents as living in New Mexico, 2 cents about the wildlife and how important wildlife really is to tourism. And is there any type of wildlife management plan in place? There are bear, mountain lions, bobcats, you know, elk was, there was a big problem with elk. That was a breeding ground, and they left that breeding ground, and the young elk were not surviving because people were going up there with the motorized vehicles chasing these elk.
There will absolutely be wildlife and habitat management planning done. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's part of the Trust for Public Land and Nature Conservancy and their partners' tasks once they seal the deal. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just for everyone here, I'd like to see a show of hands on how many people would, like, if there was a trail to the summit of Fisher's Peak, how many people would use it regularly? You know, when I lived in Boulder, everyone went up to, you know, how many times have I done South Boulder and Bear Peak? Like, you know, like countless times, you know? And I think that could create the same sort of thing here.
Yeah.
Where it would draw so many people just to come and spend the night here in our town.
So a trail up to the top of the peak.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And then, of course, several more trails that, like the Rainbow Trail and the Song of Christos, you know, something that kind of goes along more level, or you get some beautiful views.
Traverse trail.
Type of trail, yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the candidates in the last election actually mentioned doing an incline, a la Colorado Springs, to draw people in. I mean, you got an incline to the ski area.
Okay, so incline, a really steep trail, in other words, right?
Well,
Okay.
they have the
Step.
incline there, it's
Yeah.
it's a workout deal. So
Yeah.
I think that would draw tourists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Something I'd like to see preserved is, there's a shaman, a Arapaho shaman that lives behind me, and he takes a group up every year. They take men and boys go in a triangle with, and take, are armed to protect. Then the women and the children come in a triangle, a wide triangle below them, and they're protected from the wildlife, and they go once a year all the way up to the peak. And I would like to see that maybe, I asked to go, and they didn't, he invited me, but he never told me about it. They're not gonna let other races probably go with them, but if that could be preserved so they could go, and then maybe one for the general public be organized like that, 2 per year.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's good to know about the Arapaho shaman. We'll look him up and.
I'll take your card and
Okay.
I'll bring him to you.
Great. Yes, sir.
I think it could be an extension of the classroom. Invite the K-12 system and the college students to have access to the property for so many reasons. So I think, as somebody that was visiting with City Council earlier, that's a great opportunity to get them involved from the early on, as they're the future of our community.
Yeah, I love that outdoor classroom and educational programming. Yeah.
Could there be paid staff to enforce the rules and regulations? Because a sign only does so much. Stay on the trail, don't harm the wildlife. If there's not someone there to enforce the rules and regulations, who's to say it's going to be updated? So really, is there going to be staff?
Again, the how this thing is going to be managed haven't been figured out yet, but that will certainly be both, we'll need to have an operations plan and a staffing plan, and paid staff and or a local volunteer force or something like that.
LNC, legal trace, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Posted and
Yeah.
cutting.
So going back to connectivity and, talking about a lot of tourists, one of the things I think we're going to be challenged with is traffic and how we move people around. And something I thought about would be interesting is exploring, can the rail be integrated in some sort of way to be moving people between both communities, to keep cars from going up there, minimizing traffic to a degree, keeping cars in town, people spending money, be thinking about connectivity in the whole process as well.
Yeah, somebody brought up the idea of a shuttle too, maybe from the Welcome Center to a trailhead, or so transportation connectivity will be important. Yes.
Maybe a place where you can fly drones.
Okay, so both drones and photography. Yeah, ma'am.
Are there any mines up there?
Any mines?
So there's quite
Not very high though, they're pretty low down.
Were you worried about safety
No,
or?
I thought the tracks.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see.
100 foot higher than Allenville.
Yeah.
Keeping the light pollution down. I'd hate to look at it and see it all lit up with lights, when we've seen it without for so long.
Good point. Dark skies and minimizing light pollution.
Over here.
Yes, thank you.
I think I'm gonna speak for the cowboys and the ranchers. That's what this was at one time.
Yeah.
So we all look back what happened in California with the fires. You're still gonna have to use some kind of livestock or forest management to, or you're not gonna have anything at all to contain this. That's a big country and it's rough. I mean, you think about hiking it, but straight up and down, but you're still gonna have to use livestock and some forestry on this. So it will preserve it for the, the future. So I think I'm gonna speak for the cowboy and the rancher and the, the natural resource folks who are gonna have some of that in there.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking for them. Yeah.
So in 20 years from now, what do I hope to encounter on Fisher's Peak? Well, I hope to still be around in 20 years, but if I am and I visit, I would still like to see the abundance of wildlife and still some form of raw nature that hasn't been disturbed yet.
I get
That's
raw
a
nature.
vision for 20 years.
Abundance of wildlife and raw nature. And somebody said, how about 50?
I'm not anti-hunting, but I was thinking maybe no hunting on there.
Okay? Yep.
I'm excited too about what we can do for the children of Trinidad, to have them connect back with their roots, to have many of them, like Felix talked about, being able to have programs about the importance of nature, the importance of care of your lands, the importance of so many things that will bring in people's hearts, because, you know, parents are working hard and not all of them get to have that time to explain what it's important about to be in that outdoor recreation and really the root of what Colorado is known for.
Great. That reminds me, some folks came out of the woodwork when I was talking today and said I'd be really interested in leading environmental education programs in the future. So that's another thing to be thinking of, sort of the potential partners. Again, we're talking maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road, but people, locals that might be interested in offering some type of programming or some type of business opportunity.
Question over here?
Yeah.
Several years ago, there were some natural gas prospectors who wanted to look for natural gas in the Lake Dorothy State Wildlife Area, which was part of the City of Ratone's watershed. And a local group opposed it. I was there. And the City of Ratone actually sued to prevent them from going in. What's the status of mineral rights?
I can speak to that. There are severed mineral rights associated with the property, but we have, with the Trust for Public Land and Nature Conservancy, we did our own title research earlier this year, and then we hired a geologist this fall to take a look at the mineral resources on the ranch. And what we can conclude definitively is that the minerals that are severed are not economically viable to get at. So basically, you know, while in theory you could see mining, you're not going to. It's not practical with the mineral resources that are underneath the surface of the property. Both of our legal staffs have approved that, and Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund is in the process of reviewing that mineral report, but all reports have been positive. So we're confident that, you know, while there are some severed rights, you're not going to see mineral development on this property.
So did you say that the mineral rights do go with the property?
We're acquiring everything that still go with the property. There are some severed rights, but it's basically, you know, you could sever oil and gas rights. That doesn't mean there's oil and gas you can economically get to. Right. And that's what you're dealing with this property, is that you do have some severed rights, but what's been severed is either not there at all, it's already been removed, or there's no economically viable way to get at it. So it's just not something that we have to worry about.
One more thing, sort of piggyback on what Si and Felix were talking about with the children, because, you know, they are our future, and teaching them mountaineering skills is huge. You know, like the Colorado Mountain Club in Golden, you know, you're taught mountaineering skills by different classes that you can take. You know, leave no trace. You know, how to camp, you know, how to survive, mapping compass skills. You know, getting kids, whether it's a chapter of the Colorado Mountain Club or through Los Angeles County creating our own, that would be a great way to get children involved in appreciating our resources and protecting them for future generations. Because, you know, we have to teach the younger generation the beauty of what we have available to us, and then how to appreciate it and save it for future generations.
Great. Yeah.
I couldn't hear everything he said, but along with kind of that educational thing, whatever buildings are on the property now, it might be interesting in the future to develop it for a camp, like, you know, Philmont down in New Mexico. You could do something for boys and girls, you know, build cottages and have camps up there.
Yeah, so potentially repurpose some of the infrastructure for camps. And then he was saying using the property, just to echo his comment, was using the property for environmental education, but also skill building, whether it's mountaineering or leave no trace or survival. Yeah.
One more I just thought of was going back to preservation, and I think there's an untapped resource here in Trinidad, Los Angeles County, which is the night sky. So as this property gets developed, if there's ways to preserve that night sky feature to it and use it as another means of use on the property.
So it's both preserve the night sky and potentially promote it, right?
Like Capulin has a night sky program, I think that they do in the summertime. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we talked about camping, but I think it'd be great to have some sort of camping element up there, and if that would have to be managed by certain ways. Also, a trail system that would connect both Raton and Trinidad. That would be horse, mountain bike, just hiking, just to kind of go back and forth, anything like that.
Yeah.
Question over here.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Emma Green, and I'm the Colfax County Coordinator in New Mexico for Healthy Kids, Healthy Communities. It's a program through Department of Health, and see some fellow Ratonians in here. And